Okay, I'm going to show you, in case you missed class or you just want a refresher, how to do the homework and how to use SPSS and what the output means and all that stuff. So what I want you to do is go to D2L and download out of this week two things. The first, in the content area, is the HSB modified small and then the one sample t-test homework. Now this is the one sample t-test homework. It looks like this. And this is the small sample HSB dataset. What I want to do is talk about how to use the one sample t in SPSS. And to do that, we need, if you look at the notes, we need a population mean. Now we're going to be looking at 4 different variables: locus of control, motivation, self-concept, and math scores. Here are the population means. And why don't I write that right there, just to make it clear. And then here are some other characteristics like skewness and kurtosis, and we'll talk about those next week. Now, what the task is to look at the following variables: locus, motivation, self-concept, and math, and determine if each racial group is different from the overall population means. Population means are given, again, right here. Now, what we want to do is we want to look at these 3 variables regarding motivation, and then also math t-scores, the first one. Now we have this race variable here, and if I double click on it, I can see what my values represent. 1 represents Hispanic students, 2 Asian, 3 black, and 4 white students. Now, if I want to run a one sample t-test, say comparing each group to this overall population mean, I can look at my compare means, and this is the menu I'm going to use: analyze, compare means, one sample t-test. And when I do that, what comes up is this little window in which I'm supposed to put my variable that I care about in, so locus of control, and I need to fill in my test value, which is the population mean. And it's test value because that's what I'm testing my sample against. And now if I click OK, I'll get this output. Takes a little while, particularly on this computer. And I'll get this output. Now, I have 66 people. The mean of all those 66 people is 0.094. Standard deviation, again, the typical distance each person is, or the average distance people are from the mean. And then the standard error, which is the average distance a sample of 66 people would be from the mean. My t-test is comprised of these values here. This is my t-value. Again, I'm always looking for something at least 2 to 1. Again, the t-ratio represents the ratio of my observed difference between this group and the population and the difference I expect there to be by chance. Degrees of freedom, 65. This is my p-value. And now if you weren't in class, you missed this part. But basically what we're doing is we're comparing this value to 0.05, or our alpha level. Now our alpha level is usually set at 0.05. And what we've said before is that means we're taking the least likely or most extreme 5% of the scores. And so if getting my t-stat is less than 5% likely if the null hypothesis is true, then I'm going to reject the null hypothesis. If the probability or my t-value, the probability of getting my t-value is greater than 0.05, then I'm going to fail to reject the null and say that there is really no difference. Now this sig is my p-value. It represents the probability of getting a t-value this big or bigger in magnitude if the null hypothesis is true. So if this is greater than 0.05, we fail to reject the null. Now, one of the problems with this is that I have just done it for my whole data set. I didn't separate it by race or anything. And what I want to do for that is go to Data, and then I have this option called Split File. And what I'm going to do is compare my groups based on race. Click OK, and then I'm going to analyze my data again. Go to Analyze, Compare Means, One Sample. Locus is still in there, my test value is still the same. I click OK, and now what I get are the sample size for each, the mean of each, standard deviation of each, standard error of each, and then a bunch of t-values and p-values. Now if I look at all these p-values, Hispanics are greater than 0.05. The probability of getting a t-stat this big for this many Asians is less than or greater than 0.05. Probability of getting this t-stat for this many African American students is greater than 0.05. And the probability of getting this t-score for the white students given this sample is also greater than 0.05. So, based on that, I can say that there is no statistical evidence that indicates that there is a difference in the locus of control between Hispanics and the general population, Asians and the general population, blacks and the general populations, or whites and the general populations. Note that I'm not saying that there's not a difference between these groups. I'm not comparing these groups to each other. I'm just comparing them to the general population. Now, what I want you to do, and you can copy this, paste it into my document. And this is providing me my statistical evidence. And we're going to break it down like this. And basically what I want you to do for each one is first write the null about the population that I'm wondering about. And I'm wondering about Hispanic students. Now, for Hispanic students, the null would say that there is no difference in the population of, or I should say, in the locus of control for the population of Hispanic students and actually it should be a between population of Hispanic students and the general population. Now, when I'm citing my evidence, I need to give my statistical proof. And I give my t-value with my degrees of freedom in parentheses, and I have my degrees of freedom right here. This is my t-value. And basically, I can either write p equals 0.135, or I can just say that p is greater than 0.05, because that's my criteria. Okay? The alternative is, again, pretty much the same thing. Only this time I'm saying that there is a difference in the locus of control between the population of Hispanic students and the general population. Now, because, again, my p-value is greater than 0.05, I am going to say that the null is true, and that's my evidence that the null is true. So I will fail to reject the null. Now, for African American students, it kind of comes out to be exactly the same thing, only the statistics are a little bit different. Now, if I'm going to do, if I'm going to do this null, I can just paste it in, change Hispanic to African American, and that, that's basically all I have to do, because I'm asking the same question. My alternative is just that there is a difference between the population of African American students and the general population. Again, using this same format, I have to look at my degrees of freedom. I have 6 degrees of freedom, so that becomes a 6. My t-value is 1.051. And my p-value is 0.334, still greater than 0.05. So again, I fail to reject the null in this case. And so I'm going with this null hypothesis here and saying that there is no difference between those populations. So basically what I want you to do is do that also for the Asian students and the white students. I want you to then do it for self-concept for Hispanic, African American, Asian, and white students. Do it for motivation scores, and then do it for math scores. Now I'm going to do one motivation in here just to make sure that you do one thing, otherwise things will get messed up. Now if I want to analyze motivation, the one thing that I have to make sure I change is this test value. And if you look at this sheet, the population mean that I gave you for motivation is 0.65. So I have to make sure I put 0.65 in this window. Click OK, and now I get my new motivation variables. And I can paste that in and do my write-ups. Now, as far as, if I'm going to do the Hispanic students again, my null general form is the same, only now I'm talking about motivation. There is no difference in motivation between the population of Hispanic students and the general population. Now if I look at my T-stat right here, I'm going to just put a page break in here so it all stays on one page. I have a t-value really close to 0, and the closer the t-value is to 0, the bigger my probability is going to be. Because again, it's a statement of what's the probability of getting a t-value of this size and magnitude or greater. And if I go to 0, well, getting something 0 or bigger is going to happen 100%, so my p-value would be 1. Now in this case, again, I have 7 degrees of freedom. I still have a negative t-value. My p-value is 0.605, and I'm again going to fail to reject the null. In terms of my alternative hypothesis, the one that I'm wondering if there is a difference in motivation between the population of Hispanic students and the general population. And that's how I would state that. Do the same thing for African American, Asian, white students. Do the same thing for math for all 4 groups. Do the same thing for locus of control for all 4 groups. And then here's the output and stuff. If your output doesn't match this, then you have a problem and shoot me an email. Otherwise, that should be it. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Good luck. See you on Wednesday. We will be in the computer lab, so you can head straight down there.